just a lot of people were convinced that she was just this year's model of a disposable, like, teen pop idol. When she first arrived in the late 2000s, just the idea that she was a teenage girl with a guitar writing her own songs, people thought, what a concept. Isn't that cute? That's like a novelty.
Welcome to Salon Talks. I am Mary Elizabeth Williams, and I am so delighted to welcome back Rob Sheffield today. He is a journalist, he's an author, he's a contributing editor at Rolling Stone. You might know him from his absolutely heartbreakingly beautiful Love is a Mixtape, one of my all-time favorite memoirs, also Talking to Girls About Duran Duran, Dreaming the Beatles, and now, I love this book so much. Heartbreak is the National Anthem, How Taylor Swift Reinvented Pop Music. Hi, Rob.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, the biggest fan of yours. This is a real fanboy thrill for me.
No, biggest fan of yours, stop. Okay, we sound like we're at a Taylor show. We're just gonna give each other bracelets now.
Absolutely,
We're just
we've
gonna,
got the bracelets.
I've got a bracelet that says Rob on it. You have been following this woman since she was a teenager, right? You saw your first Taylor show in 2011?
2011, it was the Speak Now tour.
Having watched her basically grow up in front of our eyes, what do you think you've had access to her, you've been backstage with her. We all feel like we all have a Taylor in our own minds. We all have the Taylor who exists in our heads. What do you think we're getting wrong or we don't know about the Taylor we don't see? Because we feel like we see everything.
We feel like we see everything, and she is so meticulous in constructing these Taylor characters that she brings to life. All the different characters in her songs. We all have our personal Taylor, and it's funny that so much of that is what songs we think of as speaking directly to us. I'm very much a Mirrorball person. I'm very much a New Romantics person. I'm kind of a Mirrorball person who wishes he were the New Romantics person.
With like a New Romantics Rising.
Yes. Yes. I would love to be the blank space person, but I'm realistically for me, New Romantics is me at my best. That's how I picture it. Whereas Mirrorball is probably more the day-to-day. But there's always this idea that there's the real Taylor behind this, and that everybody feels like they get things about the real Taylor that nobody else does. And to me, that's something that's really kind of fascinating, but also beautiful about the phenomenon that everybody feels like they have their own lens on Taylor that's different from everybody else's, and everybody's right about that.
And everybody's right, because you use the word character, and I think that's interesting, because I think we get so over-invested in that, like, every song is actually a piece of journalism. It's very easy to interpret everything she says as, I'm speaking exactly the truth, instead of seeing that she's also creating characters, that she's also telling stories, that's part of her songwriting.
Yes. Well, if you'll forgive me comparing her to Dante, and I feel confident that you will, but an analogy I make in the book is Dante, of course, writing the Divine Comedy, where like Dante is the main character, and we speak of Dante poet and Dante pilgrim. It's like two different, and when you're talking about Dante's poetry, it's just understood that one is the person in the poem and one is the author who's writing the poem. And it's very much like that with Taylor. She is the one writing the songs. She is the one constructing the albums, putting everything together, putting the show together with so much meticulous care so it's different every night. And also she is this realm of characters that she creates in these songs that we identify with or relate to or are terrified of becoming, or are terrified that we already are, or are threatened by. She creates these vivid characters that we all have intense emotional reactions to.
I want to talk about that intense emotional reaction because she's so polarizing. That's part of her brand. And she knows it and she loves it.
She loves it.
She loves it. What is it, though, that about her that you talk in the book about Petty Taylor, you talk about her feuds, but there's also something else, and I don't always know what it is that makes people really dislike her or dismiss her. Say, it's girl power, like she's a thin blonde, her music is irrelevant, it only appeals to little girls. She's all about her boyfriends. There are a million things that make people dislike her. What do you think the secret sauce is that makes her both so polarizing and so fiercely, devotedly beloved?
I think it's largely the same thing. She is so fanatically driven to keep topping herself. She never wants people talking about what she did last year. She's never satisfied with people saying like, yes, that album she did a couple years ago or the one before that, like that was so great. And that's never going to be enough for her. She's never going to repeat herself, even when it's the obvious, sensible, sane move. So after making Red, which Red is a huge favorite for me, and that's a perfect pop album, it's a perfect country album, it's a perfect rock album with that 70s Laurel Canyon singer-songwriter vibe in so many of the songs. It's got disco, it's got dubstep, it's kind of a perfect pop album. After Red, I thought, wow, I hope and assume she spends the rest of her life making that album over and over again. I'd be absolutely delighted if that's what she'd chosen to do. I would not at all mind if, in 2024 we were saying, okay, this year's version of Red was pretty good. A little better than last year's version, maybe not as the one 3 or 4 years ago. And that's just something she absolutely decided not to do in ways that seem completely insane. Like why did she immediately after that, she just ripped up her own formula that she'd spent so long building and perfecting and made a new wave synth pop 80s record. And decisions like that, I think, are part of what make her so polarizing, because she is never settling down in one spot long enough for people to categorize her.
And I wonder if that's also part of what is vexing to critics. You are a man, you write for Rolling Stone, you're not a 24-year-old. I know how she is often treated critically. Do you think that that's part of why she may be not taken as seriously critically?
Absolutely.
Especially by, I'm going to say, men.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when she first appeared, and a lot of people just took a look at her and assumed that she was just bubblegum pop. And it was really amazing how long that went on, for a very long time, and you still see it. You still see a lot of that. It was pretty much universal in her early years, really strange. And just a lot of people were convinced that she was just this year's model of a disposable, like, teen pop idol.
Rob, do you think there was a moment, an inflection point where that changed, where she started to arrive not just with her fans, her young fans, but where the grown-up world started saying, oh, she's a real artist?
I think the last walls pretty much tumbled with Folklore and Evermore, where she just made Lover, another like really strange about face. She just made Lover, which was such a designed to be a very pop album, one that had a little bit of everything, a little bit of country, a little bit of pop. Very much designed for radio, very much designed to be a crowd pleaser, lots of pink on the cover. Then less than a year later, she's making these indie folk albums where the cover is in black and white, and she's like standing in the woods, and she's doing all these acoustic songs.
And this is over a decade into her career, by the way.
Yeah.
She's been creating for over 10 years at this
Absolutely.
point. And people finally go like, hey, there might be something to her.
Yeah. But I think it's partly the way that the pop world changed in her wake. It's really strange to think when she first arrived in the late 2000s, just the idea that she was a teenage girl with a guitar writing her own songs, people thought, what a concept. Isn't that cute? That's like a novelty. Of course, that's her gimmick, you know? Like, that's why the little girls are like attracting to her, because of her supposedly writing the songs. So many people were convinced that she didn't write the songs. And you still see that. You still hear that from, it's something that Oasis and Blur can agree about. Like, they will both accuse Taylor Swift of not writing her own songs.
Or singing her own songs.
Yes. And for her early years, just the idea that she was this young girl with a guitar singing her own songs about her own life, she was the only one doing that. That was a real stepping out on a limb kind of thing for a pop artist to do. And people were really just slow to see that she actually was a real songwriter, and that these young girl fans that she had were a very sophisticated and discerning audience. A lot of people are always threatened by the teenage girl fans of pop music. And you look at what Taylor was doing in 2007, 2008, when she was just fighting so hard to prove this could be done. Just, young girl, guitar, her own songs. There's no male producer or male Svengali who's pulling the strings. She is the one telling the story as she goes along. And you look at just a few years later, right now, in 2024, and that's what pop music is. Like, what is huge in pop music right now is all the Taylor Swifts that have arrived in her wake. Because after she proved it could be done, lots of these fans that she had, picked up guitars and started writing their own songs. And that's why we see, what's huge now, whether it's Chapel or Sabrina or Charlie or Billie or Olivia. So many of these artists who are women writing their own songs about their own lives on this very real and candid level, and not having any, male producer writing the songs for them, which used to be the standard practice for decades and decades. There were all these teenage pop girls who had some male producer writing their songs, and that just doesn't exist anymore. Now it's like these women writing their own songs.
And when we go back to that era, what you also had at that time, as you say, is these male producers, but also these manufactured talents, who, by the way, many of them are now still the biggest, strongest star. You've got your Arianas and your Mileys and Camila. You've got all of these artists who came out of kind of a factory system, really. The other side of that, the darker side, as we have seen recently, is when you have a case like One Direction and you have what happened with Liam Payne. When you have talent that is that young, thrown into a one of the most cutthroat industries, how do you think she was able to sidestep the pitfalls? And what are those pitfalls? And we just saw recently, it's a very dangerous place for a young person to be.
Sure. And I think she'd studied the past. I think part of how she stayed out of those pitfalls was she's always been a super music geek. And that's something that's always been very apparent in what she does. And I think she had studied the past and studied the stars. She was always a pop fan. I love the moment when NSYNC appeared at the Video Music Awards and were a surprise on stage with her. And she said, "I had your dolls." And I just love that, because I love picturing so much of Taylor comes out of that primal experience for her, being a really young music fan and being into NSYNC, being mostly into the female country stars of the 90s. And for her to understand the pop world and understand pop history, I think she made a lot of decisions really young about what she did and didn't want to do. And she stuck to those.
Really young.
Really young.
Really young, which is insane to me. And when you talk about the sort of the male Svengali, I want to talk about Scooter Braun and her power move at a young age to take back her songs and to create, there had been nothing like that. And I think that's also part of why people don't like her, is the absolute aggressiveness of making a move like that. Tell me a little bit about what the significance of Taylor's version.
I mean, aggressiveness is a very, very good word for it. So the news breaks that her record company, the people that she knew and trusted and had spent her whole career with, the people that she had described in her liner notes as family, they had sold her catalog to her worst enemy. And how she responded was saying that she was going to re-record all her old albums her own way. And that sounded, at the beginning, like the most ridiculous idea anybody had ever heard. It's one of those things, now nobody wants to admit that they were a skeptic about it. It's one of those things, it's like Bob Dylan going electric. Nobody wants to admit that they were the one who booed.
Rob, is it true that she got the idea from Kelly Clarkson?
I've never heard that.
Really? There was a tweet that Kelly Clarkson did back in the day, apparently, that said, what you should do is just re-record them yourself.
I would have a hard time believing Taylor didn't come up with that idea herself. It's such a Taylor idea. And again, people thought it was an empty threat. And I am more than willing to admit that I was one of those people. I felt, based on everything I know about the music industry and everything I know about her and her career, this would be a crazy use of her time at this moment. Her energy, her effort, she's Taylor Swift right now. She needs to keep on being Taylor Swift. I couldn't see any scenario where she would follow through in that threat and re-record her life's work in her spare time while she is also making these new records. And needless to say, she made good on that threat and not only got away with it, not only didn't embarrass herself, but made it a triumph that made people relate to those albums more, because people related to the idea of an adult sort of revisiting these stories that they told about themselves at a younger age. The clearest cut example of that is All Too Well, the 10-minute version. And that was my favorite song in the world before she did the 10-minute version. I didn't think I could love that song more. But for her to go back and, in her 30s and revisit the person she was in her early 20s, writing a song about herself when she was a late teen, and just that sort of sense of going through life and sort of revisiting your own story as you move on and as you grow older, I think that made people relate to her more than ever.
Yeah, it's spectacular. And your least favorite Taylor song is Bad Blood. Rob, one question, how dare you? How dare you? Why?
It's a fair question.
Why?
It doesn't have a tune. Usually Taylor doesn't cut a quarter like a melody. The chorus is just two notes sung over and over again, and not the two most melodious notes in the world. To me, it just seems like it was, I get the idea behind it. It's not like I leave the room when she does it live, as she always does. I always sing along. I always have a good time. The worst Taylor Swift song is still, better than most people's best songs.
Still a banger, right?
I'm not saying it's not a banger. I'm saying that there's 273 better songs in her catalog. But it's funny that for me, that's one that it was so strange for me when that was a single. I was like, 1989 has so many genius songs on it, and that's a single. But again, she does everything her own way. She is clearly not taking any wise industry advice from any wise industry men, and she just calls these shots herself.
I want to ask you one more thing, because when you talk about the wise industry men, she is ending her era's tour. We are also ending an era as a nation.
Right? Yeah, we are.
Right now, we sure are. The way in which Taylor represents and holds up to us ourselves has been interesting for the last 15 odd years. You talk about how she has paved a way for other artists. You talk in the book about how you knew in 2011, the girls watching her right now are going to grow up and do incredible things with their own music because they see her doing it. Do you think that's going to change now? Do you think after a year in which all these incredible women have released all these incredible albums, is this a moment that may not happen again? Because you're going to have the future president of the United States tweeting out, "I hate Taylor Swift."
Well, and we have a real misogynist resurgence in, that this male candidate who, it's no exaggeration to say, is based his campaign around declaring war on women, and that he won the popular vote is certainly a devastating manifestation of the misogyny that is so deeply embedded in American culture. And that's definitely part of this story that she's telling, unfortunately. That this is a moment where there is both intense feminist activity and intense misogynistic backlash.
Yeah. For the childless cat ladies of the world, we'll see what comes next. One more question. If you were to sum up this moment in history with a Taylor Swift song, what do you think it would be?
This moment in history,
this moment
today?
Right now in this
48 hours ago, I might have given a different answer.
Yeah, what's it today?
Honestly, I'm going to say it's New Romantics, which is a song that, honestly, I've loved that song forever. It's always been one of my very favorites. I think it's always number 2 on my Taylor Swift songs ranked list. And yet it has more resonance now, hearing it after, at a moment when Heartbreak really is the national anthem.
I would also say this is why we can't have nice things. But I like your answer too. Rob, this book is incredible. I love it so much. You don't have to be a Taylor fan to love this book. Doesn't hurt. But if you want to understand music right now and the last 15 years, I think I think you should read this book. It's incredible. Heartbreak is the National Anthem. Rob Sheffield, thank you so much. Come back anytime.
Thank you so much.
Please keep writing more books so you can come back.
It's always such a joy to talk to you. It's like absolutely like the biggest thrill for me. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
You're the best.
You are. Thank you for watching Salon Talks. If you had a good time, why not subscribe right over here so you can get more conversations with your favorite artists, actors, directors, writers, comedians, musicians, politicians, everybody you love, and I love too. And while you're here, why not watch another video right now?